All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been going over the PowerPoint slides and giving some code explanation also for our textbook, Murox ASP.NET 4.6 Web Programming with C#, 2015 6th edition. We've gone through the first two chapters. The first chapter was an introduction to ASP.NET programming, and in the second chapter we talked about how to develop a simple one-page application. In this chapter, as mentioned, it's how to use HTML5, CSS3, and Bootstrap with ASP.NET. Now, the Bootstrap component is new for this textbook. In the old version, the 2012 version of the book that I used to use, they'd had nothing in there about Bootstrap. So in this chapter, we will talk about external style sheets, and I've shown you a little bit about that. We will add the Bootstrap NuGet package to our application. We will describe some of the HTML5 common terms: element, block element, inline element, start tag, content, end tag, self-closing tag, and attribute. Describe the use and benefits of the HTML5 semantic elements. Describe the proper use of the HTML div and span elements in an HTML5 document. Describe 3 ways to include CSS on a page, which are inline, internal, and external. Describe the use and benefits of an external style sheet. Describe the coding for CSS, element type, class, and ID selectors. Describe the components of a CSS rule set. Describe the use of the CSS class attribute, and I showed you a little bit of that already. Describe the issue of cross-browser compatibility and show us some workarounds. Explain what responsive web design is and how Bootstrap implements it. Describe how the Bootstrap grid system works. So we're going to pretty up what we did in the last chapter, if you look right here. It's going to look like this, which is a little bit more pleasing to the eye than what we looked at previously. There is no way, first of all, it is about 7:15 already, but even if it wasn't, there is no way in heck that I could get all of this done today. This will be at least a 2-part lecture, possibly a 3, 4, or 5-part lecture. So I'm going to do some of it today and then continue on with it tomorrow. So this is what we're going to build. When you create a brand new empty project, this is all that gets generated right here. You saw this earlier. All right? There's no title put in it. There's no links to any external CSS files, etc. There's none of that stuff. Now, you should know what the doc type already means. It means, in this case, since we're using the HTML5 doc type, which is just doc type HTML, what this means is that we're using HTML5 for the document. The title is what shows up in the address bar. You should know that. And the link, which we'll put in, is if we want any external links. Okay? This is all of the code, basically, that we put in earlier. You saw that in the header, and what they're saying is really in the header is where you should be putting that image. So let's see if that's what I did, because it probably is not. So let's do a file, open, website, and now we want to peruse our way down to future value 3. Remember, don't open it and open up one of these. Keep it closed, highlight that, and click open. All right, and let's go to our default ASPX file, which is right here. So it looks like right underneath our body, we want to put in a header, which we don't have right now. So I'm going to grab all of this image stuff that you see right here. And for now, I'm going to cut it. And I'm going to come in here and add a header tag. And then paste that back in. Now, if we did it right, let me save. It shouldn't look, whoops. That's what you, if this ever comes up, do not save. Because notice where it's saving it back into your default. Just click cancel and click that triple disk icon. Well, and if that happens, then just do a file, save all, like that. And if that still happens, just cancel out of it because it should have saved. All right, if I go to design mode, it still looks the same. But now this is associated with the header of the document. All right, previously it was inside of the body. All right. I don't feel the need to be really going over a lot of HTML talk with you. Okay, so I'm going to go back into the source, and then what we want to do is we want to take everything that's in here basically that now is in a div. Okay, we can keep that div, it's not really going to hurt anything, but inside of here, all right, so we've got our header and our body, and after our header we're going to put in a main right here. All right, and I'm going to grab the rest of this, the ending main tag, and I'm going to put it down at the very bottom here. All right, and our H1 tag should be right at the top. I don't think we need this div here anymore, so I'm going to try at least to remove it. I can always put it back again if I need it. And I've got to remove that ending div tag. Don't leave hanging. Looks like it removed it for me. So let me save and let me run it again. Oh, there is that div tag right there. So let me run it again. In fact, let's look at it first in design mode. Still looks the same, still looks good. And let's run. It should still run, it should still work. All I did was, change around a few things. So what did we have here before? It was 3.0, and it was 10, and that should give me $7,004.54. It does. My clear stuff works. I still get my validation messages there and there. So everything is still working. That's good. It's always, whenever you're going to make any kind of checks like this, you should always go back and check to make sure you didn't screw anything up. All right. Now they show you the rest of the code here, and what they're doing is actually some really good stuff. So I'm going to go back into the source here. So I've now put in the header tag. I've got my main tag. I'm not going to tab all this over. It looks fine the way it is. But under my first label here, I'm going to add at the bottom 4 equals, and it's drop down list monthly investment. Okay. I'm not going to talk about what that means. We've already talked about that already. Okay, so then in our drop-down list, okay, right here, they want us to add a CSS class of validator. And don't worry, we haven't written it yet. Notice it remembers our error that we did in our auto style 1 and 2. Okay? All of these are going to have validator. Let's just change them all to error. Not errot, error. All right. So we've got those. Here's our next labels. So that's our future value. So this will say 4 equals, I don't want 4 color. It's doing that because the IntelliSense is kicking in. That 4 is going to be equal to label the future value. And we want to set this CSS class equal to error. I guess here's our 4 equals. There's that. This should have a 4 equals. Which is that. This should have a CSS class. This should have a 4 equals. This should have a CSS class. That's got the 4 equals in the CSS class. There's our 1 button. Somehow I've reset the height on there. I don't know how, but it's okay. I'm just going to leave it the way it is because it works. And there's our validators. All right, I may be missing something in here, but I'm trying to make it look more like the code that's on page 81 in the book. All right, and again, that's shown here also in these slides. All right, then they talk about the external style sheet that we're going to need. So let's look at this. So I'm going to try to replicate what's right here into my style sheet. So I'm going to go back to here. I have to open up my style sheet. Right now, that's all that's in it. So I want to add the code that's shown on page 83 in the book. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to manually put this in. All right, so we had just our error class before, and they call theirs validator, but I'm going to leave it at error class. They want the font size to be a little less. 95%. Color red, I put a bold font weight, they didn't. Margin left of 1M. All right, and what else is in here? Let's put in the body stuff, which should always go at the top. It just makes sense to do that. And we're going to come in and we're going to change our font family. We're going to try to use Arial, if not Helvetica. And if not, a sans serif. Our font size will be smaller. Again, I'm just using what the author has here. Our width will be set up to 550 pixels. We want to center it on the page, which is the 0 auto. We're going to have 10 pixels of padding all the way around it. Our background color, which already is white, but just to be sure, again, we could have just said color also, but that'll be white. And we'll have a 2-pixel solid black border. So let's take a look at just what we've done here. Okay, there's our border. You see it's centered. It's coming together. Doesn't look too bad. Let's take this, and since we've done all that, let's move this over. now it all shows. That's good. All right. Go back into our style sheet. Next, we want to also do our H1 tag. We want that to have a font size of 140%. Again, always a good idea to work with percents or M's, which are relative values. No padding. And a bottom margin of 0.5 M's. And again, if we go back and check again, all right, it has changed this. It may not look like it, but it has changed it. Oops. Why do I keep doing that? I don't know. All right, our labels. We want them to float to the left with a width of 10 M's. All right. So what they call validator, I'm calling error, but we're going to also create an entry class. All right, there's the error class I've already done. For our button, just about finished here. And the last one. All right, so that's the external CSS that we put in. There it is. If we save, oops, I don't know why I keep doing that. And if we run this again, you can make your own determination as to whether it looks better or not better. Move that, there we go, that makes it a little easier to see. But you'll notice, I don't know why that number is red. Oh, I do know why, we'll fix that in a second. These might all be red, so don't worry if they are. Okay, it all works. That's the bottom line, is it all still works. All right, so I have to change this. Go back into my source mode. The only things where we wanted the error class, the CSS class to be error, were for our required field validators. 2, 3, 4. That's what we wanted there. All the other ones should have been entry. There's one text box. There's another text box. There's our label, drop down there. Label, drop down. Label, again, that should be entry. Our buttons. Should have a CSS class of button. Put in both of those. All right, I believe now everything is looking the way it's supposed to. Okay. There we go. Okay, so as far as I can tell, at least everything is looking the way that it should be looking. Okay, so I've now implemented the changes that are discussed in the book here on these slides. Now, if you want more on the CSS and exactly what that was doing, all right, you can take a look in the book on pages, oh, I don't know, like about 78 through 82. All right. So next they talk, you should know what all these elements are already. Okay. You should understand enclosed, self-enclosing tags like a BR, which people just don't do because you don't need that. And the image tag, and again, even if you don't put them in an HTML5, if you don't put in that closing one, it still works just fine. How to code attributes, you know this. You know how to put in HTML comments. You know that this is an HTML character entity, ampersand NBSP, which stands for non-breaking space. If you need more on that, it's pages 84 and 85. The HTML5 semantic elements are shown here. We've got header, and it is possible to have more than one header on a page. Typically, it's just at the top. Main for the main content of the page. Main can only appear once. It cannot be a child of an article tag, or a child of an aside tag, or a child of a footer tag, or a child of a header tag, or a child of a nav element tag. Section is a generic section of a document. Article is like an article in a paper. Nav is for your links. We'll get into all this stuff in later chapters. Aside is for like a sidebar article. Figure is typically set up with an image or a table, and footer for the footer on the page. And they show an example here on page 87. Remember, these are semantic elements, and you should use them to structure the contents of the web page. All of these are supported by the modern browsers, and they'll also work on older browsers if you use workarounds that we'll talk about in a little bit. The two benefits that you get from using these semantic elements are, number one, your HTML is simplified, so is your CSS, and number two, you get improved SEO, which is search engine optimization. Div and span, which is on pages 88 and 89 in your book. Before HTML5, div elements were used for basically ordering everything. Today, most HTML5 elements replace divs, article, section, etc. Before HTML5, spans were used for a portion of text, like maybe a sentence or a paragraph or a word or a letter, to apply formatting to. Now this changes a little bit with the advent of Bootstrap, because with Bootstrap you end up providing more div tags than you do with just straight HTML5. So this is divs before HTML5. Here's spans. Okay. As far as providing styles, we've talked about this already. It's always considered best practice to use external style sheets because it leads to the separation of concerns. In particular, it separates your HTML, which are your attributes, basically the way the page is set up semantically, from the way it is shown aesthetically, which is what your CSS does. External style sheets also make it easier to use the same styles for more than one page. You also saw the embedded style sheets within the style tags. Those are put in automatically for you by the system. if you've got more than one rule for the same property that you apply to the same element, the last rule that you put in is the one that gets applied. On pages 92 and 93, they talk about how to code some of the basic selectors. Remember the type selector? Those are type selectors right there because the type is body or main or paragraph. All right, anytime you start something with a dot, it's a class selector. Anytime you start it with a pound sign, it's an ID selector. Remember that IDs must be unique on each page. So if you want to use the same CSS for multiple elements, you use a class. Again, here are some of the styles that we had. This is 94 and 95 in the book from the CSS style sheet. Remember, these are CSS rule sets. They're a selector and one or more values inside of curly braces. The selector is the identifier that's coded at the beginning of the rule set. The rule consists of a property, a colon, and a value. All right, then a semicolon. You can put in comments if you want to. Again, comments in CSS files are added via the / star and //. As far as cross-browser compatibility is concerned, these are pages 96 and 97 in the book. All right. The author mentions here that if you want, you can go out to HTML5test.com, and it's got some ratings on different browsers. There's still differences today in the way different browsers handle HTML and CSS. You want your code and your app to work with as many web pages as possible. That's cross-browser compatibility. You still need workarounds for IE8, but you shouldn't need them for any other type of browser. For cross-browser compatibility, you can use the HTML5 shiv and the normalized.css style sheet. This book doesn't show either one or use either one. It shows you the shiv right there. What that shiv does, as mentioned right there, is it basically forces older browsers like IES to, as much as it can, recognize HTML5 semantic elements. Visual Studio has its own way of working with HTML and with CSS. It does provide IntelliSense. So if you change an opening tag, the ending one is changed too. If you enter the opening bracket and you put something in, it'll do the capitalization for you correctly. So Visual Studio provides IntelliSense, and it also provides code snippets. I'm not going over the snippets. I don't use them. Some people love them, some people don't, but they're in your book on 98 and 99. Next, they talk about in here about the WAI, good morning, -ARIA, which again, you're talking about working with people. These are accessibility standards to make it as your website as accessible as possible for people, especially people who may have something, that not an affliction, but something that where they're a little different. They might be blind, they might be deaf, etc. So some of the disabilities are shown here. If you want a good starting point for this, and I think it's mentioned in here, nope. The author says that if you want to, you can go out to webaim.org, or you can go out to the World Wide Web Consortium also. Again, accessibility refers to the qualities that make a web application accessible to every user, if and when possible. The IntelliSense for Visual Studio 2015 supports the WAI ARIA attributes. I'll just go over 2 more pages, and then we're going to get to the Bootstrap stuff, and I'm going to just stop right there. Here are some examples of WAI ARIA values. Here's an external style sheet. I already mentioned how you could take it and just drag it in. I showed you how to create an external style sheet the same way the author does it here. We right mouse clicked on our project name. We chose add and the style sheet command. We opened up the style sheet in our editor and added the styles we wanted to add. It may or may not have modified any of the associated .aspx code. We could switch back and forth from source code mode to design mode to immediately see any changes we made. If you want to comment out and uncomment stuff, as it says, you can use these. I use the comment and the uncomment button in the style sheet toolbar, and what I mean by that is if I come into here and I decide, for example, that I don't want this thing in here anymore, I could manually comment out each line, or I can highlight all of it. Stop my program run, of course. I could manually highlight all of it and go over and click right there, and you'll notice that it clicking it once puts in comments, clicking the one next to it uncomments. All right. That gets us to page 104 and slide 47 of 72. So most of the rest of the chapter here is going to discuss the use of Bootstrap. And I'm going to need more time for that. So I'm going to stop the lecture right now. This will be part 1, and we'll pick it up next time as part 2. I'm going to do one more file, save all. Whoops, not that. File, save all. All right, again, I don't want to do this, so I'm just going to click cancel. It all should be saved, so I'm going to do a file, close solution. It says, do you want to save this? I'm going to say no. All right, ideally everything is in there, but I can double check by doing a file, open, website, reopen the one I just did, make sure it has all my changes in it, so I'm going to just run it right from here, and it does, I can already tell. It's centered, it's on the page, it's got everything else in it. All right, I still get these. I still get these. My clear only works if I had valid values, so the clear will only fire if I got a valid value. Now the clear will fire. All right, so now I can go and quit. So I'm going to do a file, close solution. Do I want to stop debugging? Yes. Do I want to save that? No. Always say no if it asks you anything about a solution file. So I can close this now. And again, I will pick it up tomorrow on part 2, where we'll start to go through the Bootstrap part of this.